Hey there, this is Barry Rivera with Austin Parks Foundation. Thank you for tuning in to this little Hummingbird Society bug catching adventure here in St. Edwards Park along Bull Creek with our friend Andrew Clamann from Watershed Protection Department. And Andrew, could you tell us a little bit about your role and Watershed's role in our city?
The Watershed Protection Department is just that. They want to protect all of our watersheds, and the watershed is all the area that goes to the creek. So part of that starts with monitoring. How good is the creek? Is it in a good condition or is it in a bad condition? And if it's in a bad condition, why is it in a bad condition? Let's try to fix that. So monitoring can take several different forms. We can take a sample to the laboratory and see what pollutants in them, or we can look at what's living there. If you've got a lot of fish, a lot of bugs, a lot of different kind of living things, then you know the water's probably pretty good. So every year, me and my team will come out to all the creeks in Austin and we get samples from what lives in the creek.
That's awesome. So you get paid to catch bugs.
Well, that's a tiny part of my job, but I do, and it's actually quite fun. As a scientist, I get to do a lot of things in the field, and catch bugs is one of them.
That's awesome. And so you mentioned water quality is one of the things that you can tell that you're looking for in the bug sampling, but is there anything else you can tell by the different bugs you catch?
Well, so the different bugs I catch can tell me all about the oxygen in the water and the pollutants and how clear the water is, but it also tells me about their habitat. If we've got a big watershed with nice edges with lots of green things, then the leaves come in and the rocks are there, you might have a lot of different creatures. So that actual habitat itself is very important. If you had a bunch of homes around and parking lots and businesses, you probably wouldn't have all those trees, you probably wouldn't have all those leaves and all those grasses, and the rocks would get blown away from every storm, so you'd have really poor habitat. So just the physical habitat is a reflection of how we steward the rest of the watershed.
Cool, that's awesome. Well, what's our strategy today to try to catch bugs, and is there a way that the kids at home could do this on their own?
Absolutely. In fact, I do it when I'm on vacation too. Yeah. I do this even though I'm not getting paid for it. So the bugs don't like to be out in the open where all the fish are. The bugs like to be hiding because they're little snacks for fish. So if you flip over little rocks in the creek, especially in an area like this where you've got little waterfalls and rocks and running water over them, if you flip over rocks, you can see little bugs. Now you have to look closely because some of those bugs are really tiny. Most of them are really tiny. But this is the best place to look for bugs in the creek.
Awesome. And should you put the bugs back or take them home or eat them? Or
there's a great saying, and that's take only pictures and leave only footprints. So if you pick a rock up, don't chunk it up on the ground because there might be bugs living on it. That was their home. Try to put the rock back right where it was. And if you found a really cool bug, just watch it. You don't need to hold it. Some will pinch. And definitely put those back in the water right where they were so they can go on about their lives.
Cool. All right. Well, should we go look for some bugs?
Let's do it.
All right.
So, what's this tool?
This is called a Cerber sampler. It's basically just a net. It's like any kind of net, like a butterfly or a net to catch bugs with. But this one is a scientific tool. It has a very specific area, so I know when I sample, I know how big the area is that I grab the bugs from. We put it in water facing upstream, and the net fills with water, and I can move around some rocks without hurting any fish or anybody. When I move the rocks around, the little bugs jump off, and they float into my net. So when I'm done, and I scrape off everything in this area, all the little buggies are going to be down on the bottom of my net. And I can dump my net out and see what kind of bugs are there. Here's one that I just dumped out a second ago. You can see on the underside are some little damselflies. They look just like dragonflies when they get older. They've got gills on the tail. They kind of swim like little fish and they crawl around on the rocks. There's even smaller little bugs in here, teeny weeny little mayflies that zip around. All of these things are hanging on to the bottom of rocks. Now the bottom of a rock is basically like a bug apartment complex. There are many, many families of different kinds of creatures under these rocks. And I'm going to put one of these damselflies back on this rock here because that's where he likes to live. It's protected from the fish that eat him. It's got a bunch of food around it for him. He can live his whole life just on the bottom of this rock. When he comes out of the water and he flies away, they mate real quick, lay eggs in the water, and then start all over again. And he's living alongside little caddisflies, little tiny wormy looking creatures that curl up into a ball when they're scared. They have little gills underneath and little legs that hang onto the rocks and little hooks on their tails to keep them when the storm happens. And tucked away inside these rocks are other little creatures, little worms, little snails, little stoneflies, little mayflies, little dobsonflies. Hundreds of different kinds of things might be living on this rock. Sometimes they're hard to see. This is a mayfly. Mayflies have 3 long skinny tails, 3 little hairs like tails. And you can see the gills on their back. The gills are waving back and forth, kind of like grass in the wind. When he moves those back and forth, that helps water flow across his gills and helps him get oxygen. Now you can see he sprawls out and his head is really flat and he's grabbing onto the bottom surface. That's because he's adapted to living underneath these rocks. This creature is kind of like one of those ocelots or the eagles. They need really good habitat. They need a forest. They need a really good habitat to live in. And that's, if I find this creature here, his name is Thralodes. If I find this creature here, I know that the water is good quality, good water quality. And he's actually sitting right next to, let's look over here. That is a black fly. Now up north, if anybody's ever lived up north, black flies are terrible because they bite like mosquitoes. But this guy doesn't. He's a black fly that doesn't bite. Now they'll stick to the back of a rock and they'll open up these huge fans on their head and they'll grab all the little particles of food that are floating through the water. And when they're ready, he'll pop out and become a little fly that flies around.
There's 2 of the little guys, right? Right next to each other?
Yes, they are. And you can see they kind of stick with their rears and they move around, kind of like a little leech. This is a little tiny beetle, and he's not going to move around much because he's playing possum right now. But the little tiny beetle is called a riffle beetle, and riffle beetles like to be in the water, stuck to rocks, just like everything else here. So the creeks are host to hundreds and hundreds of different kinds of organisms. And some of them, like this snail here, they can survive pretty much anywhere, from like a little mud puddle all the way to a big, beautiful river. Other ones, like these caddisflies, these 2 little pink caddisflies, they really need water that's clear and clean and full of oxygen, low in nutrients, low in pollutants. And this guy, this damselfly, they look like dragonflies when they grow up. He kind of in the middle. He can survive in a creek or a river or a lake or a pond. They can pretty much go anywhere. But aquatic worms and snails are the kinds that can live anywhere in poor water quality or good water quality. They're kind of like rats. They can live in an alley or they can live in a rainforest. And these guys are kind of like the ocelots and the golden eagles and the creatures that pretty much need good water quality all year round. And these guys right here in the middle, they're kind of like squirrels. They can live pretty much anywhere, but they can't have too terrible a condition. But by seeing what kind of creatures we have in our creek, we know that the creek is either good water quality or bad water quality. When you find lots of different kinds of creatures, like diversity, pretty much you know it's good water quality. Now you could have a diversity of cruddy creatures, sure. But when you see creatures that can live in the poor water quality, and you see creatures that live in the medium, and you see creatures that live in the good, you've got that broad spectrum, you know you've got some good water quality. And the other neat thing is that if I were to take a sample of this water and bring it to the laboratory and look at what's in the water, is any oils or grease or pollutants, I can only tell you what was in the water at that second, that point in time. These creatures have to live here every day, day in and day out, hour after hour, week after week, month after month. So they need that water quality to be good for a long period of time. So if I find a bunch of really good bugs here, then I know that that water's been good for a long time too. So it's very important to do that. You can do that with fish, you can do that with bugs, you can do that with algae. Any living thing has that spectrum of creatures that need good water quality or can survive without it. Interesting. Let me go, I'm gonna see if I can't find a dragonfly or something big. Go ahead and flip a few rocks too. If you find anything neat, you can put it in either that one or put it in the new one. That way it won't blend in with the other side.
Do bugs have like mating? I mean, would there, because it's springtime, be more bugs at a certain stage right now, or their short lifespan so short they're just constantly?
There's a little of both. You know that big organism that I showed, the dobson fly? That thing's 2 or 3 years in the water before it comes out.
Oh wow.
And then the little mayflies that you saw, those might be just a couple weeks. So it's really all over the map. The limiting factor is warmth and sunlight. And so the spring, like it is for most things, lots of warmth, lots of sunlight. That's the time when they're going to grow fast, they're going to reproduce, they're going to fly, they're going to try to lay their eggs. Try to do that really quickly, especially in central Texas, where during the summer, you might not have any water in the creeks. So you better hurry up and lay your eggs.
Let's see. Have you heard about those cicadas? The cicadas that were like underground for like 18 years?
Yeah, the periodicals. Those are up north. But we have species around here that last for quite a few years too. Just not that.
That's really cool. That is pretty neat.
Roly-polies are the only ones that are completely terrestrial. They're completely free from the need for water. But when you flip them over, you know they've got those two little white dots under their belly?
Yeah.
Those are their gills. They still have gills.
So they could go in the water?
That doesn't bother them too much. You know, they will drown. They will die.
Roly-polies.
Yeah. Let's see if we can get these guys to come swimming around. There's something there. We can probably get a bunch more. We can. So here we have a little mayfly swimming around. A little caddisfly. Oh, a fast mayfly. Look at him.
Ooh.
And this is an aquatic worm. Not all worms are earthworms. Some worms live in the water. This is an aquatic beet. Whoops. Where'd he go? Have to drum him back up again. If we get some good diversity, it'll be a little times I feel.
Oh, we saw that one earlier, right?
Almost looks like a tiny salamander or something. Alien.
You know, I often think that alien movies could never do anything as cool and weird and scary and fun as what the water can do.
Yeah.
Especially the ocean.
Whoa, that's a big one. What you got, Barry?
I don't know, tiny little.
Ooh, where'd he go? Where is he?
Oh, cool.
Nice. Good job, Barry.
Thanks.
I'm gonna cut you some
Got something.
forceps.
I don't know how to pick this thing up.
There we go. I'm going to take this gently with gentle forceps off the rocks. And you can see him. On the back, he's got 3 big gills. That's one of the ways they breathe in the water. They use these big gills. And you can see he's got a big hammerhead with eyes on either side and 2 little wings across his back. This is a damselfly. They look a lot like dragonflies. They're the little blue things you usually see on ponds fluttering around right by the edge. And they'll live in the water for a couple months, come out really quickly, mate, lay their eggs, and then start all over again. But these gills right here are for breathing the oxygen. So in order for him to live, he has to have good oxygen in the water. He has to have clear water. It can't be all silty and muddy because all that silt and mud will clog up their gills. And he likes to hide just under the rock. And he sticks to it almost like a suction cup.
I reckon here's something else. Didn't even notice that.
So this one is a caddisfly. Caddisfly kind of crawl around on the bottom of the rocks there. And you can see on his belly, he's got a bunch of gills. Again, needs that oxygen. And he's got little grabbers on the back to keep him stuck to the rock nicely. And right next to him is his home. He makes this little case out of rocks and silk. So he'll have a little retreat to stay in. And when he's ready, he'll put a cap on the top of that retreat. He'll pupate, just like a caterpillar turns to a butterfly, and fly out. And he'll be a caddisfly.
So Andrew, these man-made kind of rock formations in the creek, are these good or bad for the creeks?
Well, they're not really good or bad unless they happen too often. We all like to do it. Little dams are fun to build. If we did it every day and constantly were disrupting their homes, that would be a bad thing. A little bit here and there is not so bad. Storm events move rocks around. Moving rocks around is a natural thing, but you certainly wouldn't want to move them around all the time. That would be very hard for a bug to find a home and get his food. So after we collect all the bugs in the water, it's important that we know exactly which species we have. And there are hundreds in these waters, thousands in Texas, maybe tens of thousands across the nation. So we have to have one big book that has all the different bugs in it. And this is the damselfly that we showed you earlier. It has the long gills on the tail, and it has these wings that are going to develop into wings when it turns into an adult, and little hooks on the end of its hands, and that's help it hold onto the rocks. All of these bugs are in this book, and they tell me which ones they are. And then once I know which ones they are, I can tell whether or not they're good water quality indicators or bad water quality indicators. These are the dragonflies. And inside these little wing pads are the developing wings that you recognize to be a dragonfly.
Hi, I'm Todd Jackson, an aquatic entomologist with the City of Austin. After specimens are collected in the field of aquatic benthic macroinvertebrates using this Cerber sampler, we bring them back to the lab where we ID them using a library of different aquatic insects, a dissecting stereo microscope, and camera software that lets us zoom in on those specimens. Usually in pretty incredible details. So there you're seeing the gills of a mayfly, and in our book we can turn to where the mayflies are. You're seeing a page right there showing the different types of mayfly gills, and that's how we find out what genus or species we have. So it doesn't always have to be for us. A grad student can just say, you know, how many different kinds of stoneflies do you guys actually get in the Austin area? And we can say this many exactly, you know, and we can do it pretty quickly. So here I'm looking at, look at the general body form of these on the video. These are what you would refer to as sprawlers. See how their head's real flat? You can't even see the mouth. You have to turn it over to see the mouth. I'll turn one over. Let's see. Turn one over and you can see the mouth better. So am I centered on that? Hopefully. Now he's upside down, and you can see parts of the mouth part. You see the maxillary palps over here. We zoom way in, we can see what's called the labium. It's like the lower jaw in this book here. So like this would be your labial palps be down here, like your lower jaw. These maxilla really don't have a great analogy for us. And then the mandible and labrum would be like upper kind of, they don't really work quite like that because they gnash side to side. But then all that goes into a hypopharynx. It's just how they ingest food. Now there are all kinds of evolutionary adaptations to that. Think about the hostelum of a honeybee, which is a tube design, you know, so for collecting pollen. They have mouth parts that allow them to also masticate, but they can also kind of drink up liquids. The proboscis of a mosquito, which is used to puncture your skin, or you know, think of a butterfly, right? So it's got a curled proboscis for collecting liquids.
And the proboscis is what
Like
comes out of their mouth?
Yeah, like a mouth part. And I may even have, let me see if I've got a good picture of a proboscis in here. It's possible. If I go through my photos, well, I guess just a couple different types of mouth parts. This is not necessarily aquatic, but the chelicerae of a fishing spider, which is here, it's eating a Dobson fly. But this spider is like this big. It's like terrifying.
How big?
When one gets, it's like this big.
Wow.
The mouth parts on arachnids are kind of made for what they do. This is a wind scorpion, or camel spider is what they're called. And it's got multiple masticating parts, and it can secrete digestive enzymes. Then let's see, let's scroll down to something like the mouth parts of a fly are usually pretty good. I can show you some of these guys, at least as larvae. The chironomid is generally scraping. This is a very tiny little critter. I'll show you a coin for a reference with one. But it's scraping algae with its labor. That's actually called the prementum, but it's scraping and then chewing with these mandibles. Just different form of feeding. These are predatory chironomids in the subfamily Tanipodinae. They basically eat other chironomids. They don't naturally occur in that spiral. It's, that was me being artsy with the microscope.
Oh, wow.
So you can see a penny here. You get a good feel for scale. But I'm looking for, hopefully we've got something here with Rogovelia is a very small version of what people call like water skaters or pond skaters. They're actually in a different family, but you'll recognize it looks similar to what people call a water strider. They are surface dwelling, visually acute predators. They wait for ripples on the water to tell them a little bug has fallen in, and then they chase it down and suck the life out of it using their proboscis, because they just have like a needle that kind of injects digestive enzymes. These little oily hairs on the feet help them stay afloat and move around on the surface. That's it magnified a lot. And I'm hoping that I've got no mouth part there. maybe I've got a mouth part for the other Valiid. Let's see. Here we go. Yeah, oh, goody. Okay, so this one's upside down. We can see the proboscis right here out of focus. So I'll just keep scrolling along. That probably gets, there it is, this needle-like proboscis used for injecting digestive enzymes into prey that it finds on the surface of the water, or unlucky drowning terrestrial insects that fall into the water. Thank you, Austin Parks Foundation and Little Hummingbird Society, for joining us today to look at benthic macroinvertebrates. Again, my name is Todd Jackson, work for Watershed Protection for the city of Austin, and this is our benthic macroinvertebrate lab.